Hello, lads. Today I'd like to talk about the Stephen King novel, The Running Man. And I'm not going to go into great detail about the novel itself. There are a lot of things that could be said about it, and and so forth. I more want to talk about a particular aspect of it that I find quite interesting. And I don't know if this has been talked about by anyone else. It seems like it must have been mentioned at some point. I'm thinking that uh, if I look up reviews of The Running Man by Stephen King on YouTube, that I'll find this particular subject discussed somewhere, just because it just doesn't seem like it would be possible to avoid it. But and by the way, there's a sort of soft spoiler here, but I don't feel particularly bad about giving this spoiler. I wouldn't feel bad about it anyway, but the fact that in the introduction, which Stephen King writes to this novel, he actually gives away this particular detail in the introduction. The introduction was written in 1996. The book was published in 1982, and it's one of the books that King published under his Richard Bachman pseudonym, because he had saturated the market so much with his own books. He's always been ridiculously prolific, and there were so many books under his name, and that his agent was telling him, I guess, to sort of to cool it. But he wanted to keep writing, so he put out some books under the name of Richard Bachman, and eventually got exposed. Those books eventually got exposed as being actually by him, Stephen King. So this is only the second book I've ever read by Stephen King. The other one is this obscure novel called Rage, I think, and it was written in the early '70s, but it's about a school shooter kind of situation, and this was written. It was written, of course, before there were really school shooters, before school shooters really were a thing. So that was my interest in Rage when I was doing, when I was studying Columbine a lot, and had amassed a lot of information about Columbine en route to writing the Columbine Pilgrim. But I haven't read anything else of his, and this is only the second thing of his that I've ever read. I've got to say there are certain things I can understand the appeal, but of his writing, he's obviously skilled. But on the other hand, there is something that really I find quite off-putting about his style, in that he seems to really revel in disgustingness, and I can understand the appeal of that to a lot of readers. I mean, I can see why a lot of young boys in particular, who would ordinarily not read that much, why they would really gravitate to Stephen King, because a lot of young boys like like this kind of gross, extravagantly disgusting, horrific sorts of rubbing your face in the awfulness kind of details, that sort of like I can see why it has an appeal to that particular kind of reader. And again, I'm not going to say that he's not skilled as an author. I think as a man, I have some questions about him. But the truth is I don't know, and I don't claim to know. But I've probably heard some things just like you have. about, you know, aspects of his personal life. And of course, there's, or just maybe, it's more just about possible inclinations. You know, there's the fact that in the It novel, there's a scene where the kids all have sex for some strange reason. Like a bunch of, I think, 11-year-old kids, you know, who are the protagonists of this story. They all have sex with one another. There's like this, they just decide to have an orgy. And it's supposed to serve some purpose in the, you know, in forwarding the narrative, but people have said, well, exactly what purpose is that? And they've asked that question. And I've got to say, there are certain things about certain details in this novel, The Running Man, which are also kind of that just leave the reader somewhat queasy, and make the reader wonder, okay, what sort of a guy is writing this? Now I say that as somebody who's written some things that I think could make people say the same thing about me. So, in all fairness, you know, there is that. I'm just being honest with my talking about my response to The Running Man. Now, The Running Man is definitely an interesting story in a lot of ways. It's set in a dystopian future, and the main character is a man who's down on his luck, who's got a problem with, you know, he lives in this authoritarian society, and he's somebody who doesn't like authority, and so he has a spotty work record, but he's a man of integrity. He wants to take care of his family. He wants to take care of his sick daughter and his wife. So but he's just fed up with the way that things have been going, and he decides to audition for this broadcast called The Running Man. And in this future, this commercial network is, you know, tight with the powers that be generally. And he, you know, the Running Man is this kind of game show, or kind of what today we would say is reality show, where men who are dangerous to the system are allowed to go out and just it's sort of like this big game of hide and seek, except you know, when the people who seek you find you, they kill you. But the idea is, if you can live for 30 days, then they give you $1 billion, and that's just a joke, because nobody lasts nearly that long in The Running Man. So he becomes the titular Running Man, and lots of stuff happens, and I'm not going to really talk about the story itself, although, like I said, there are aspects of the story that are really, really interesting, and like I said, I don't want to sell King short on his you know, talent, though he obviously has. There are also things where it's like, why did you say that? Just like really egregiously gratuitous moments, that, as I said, just seem to be there because they function as some kind of sick joke for the author. And again, those aspects of the book are things I find kind of off-putting. But here's the kicker, and that is the Running Man ends with him hijacking a plane and eventually finding a way to get the plane to crash into the high-rise building where this commercial network broadcasts from, where they do all of their where they have all of their auditioning of people for the Running Man and for other sorts of sadistic reality shows that everybody watches, and then people watch these violent shows or watch these things happen to people, uh, you know, um, as a sort of catharsis, just like similar to how Rollerball functions in that movie. This incredibly violent game. People watch it because they live in an authoritarian, tyrannical society, and there's there are incredible amounts of poverty, and there's pollution. Little kids are getting lung cancer because of all the pollutants that are going in the water, and all this kind of stuff. But so people are deep down, they're pissed off, but they can't fight the system because the system is too, there's too much power there, or they don't want to. They don't want to put their lives in danger, so they just get off on. It's sort of like the 2-minute hate in Orwell's famous 1984. It enables a catharsis on the part of the viewer. They can hate on the men who are in this game and see them as the bad guys, and enjoy seeing them get tracked down and brutally killed. But the hero of the story manages to hijack a plane and crash the plane. Ultimately, he crashes the plane into the building, and it explodes. There's a massive explosion, but there's no the building does not come down. There's no story of afterwards because the trusses are weakened by the plane running into the building. It doesn't collapse in its own footprint. So that's interesting, because that had never happened before a certain date in September of 2001, and hasn't happened since, that I know of. So anyway, the fact that it ends in this way, the fact that the story ends with a 9/11 moment, and it was written in 1982, published almost 2 decades prior to 9/11. There's all kinds of stuff, all kinds of predictive programming stuff out there. There are all kinds of things that you can find. Weird references to weird and spooky, seemingly inexplicable references to things happening to the Twin Towers. You can go and find a montage of attacks on the Twin Towers, or things happening to the Twin Towers prior to 9/11, and it's quite uncanny. But this is something I find to be rather uncanny as well. And I'm not saying I know what it means, but I am saying I'm open to it not simply being a coincidence, right? And that's what most people would say. Well, it was just it's just a spectacular way to end the book, with a plane crashing into a building. Yeah, I mean, it is pretty spectacular, but why that particular ending? I don't know. It's just an interesting thing that I wanted to remark upon. So those are my thoughts on on Stephen King slash Richard Bachman. Stephen King writing under the name of Richard Bachman's book, The Running Man. I will say this for the book, it's a much better book than the movie is. The movie, I remember seeing the movie in the 80s with Schwarzenegger. It was like 86, 87, something like that. And I remember even as a teenager, even as a 15 or 16-year-old, seeing this movie and thinking, man, this is so cheesy. Why do they have to go that route? That like they change a lot about the story. It's definitely not the same story at all. And if they had stuck to the story of the actual book, it would have made for a much more compelling movie. I will say that about the book. But instead, they have this scenario where the running man is just like on some set, and he's Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's nothing like the character in the book he kind of gets chased down by these like professional wrestler types. They're the ones that the audience roots for to kill the guy who's the running man. Although, of course, Schwarzenegger ends up getting the crowd on his side, because that always happens in American movies, especially of this period. You always get to turn the crowd around, just like Rocky did. Rocky went to Moscow and boxed Ivan Drago in Moscow, and then by the end of the fight, the Russians were all chanting "Rocky, Rocky, Rocky." Yeah, right. Um, so yeah, the movie's pretty crappy. I mean, it's the kind of movie where they have as a cheap gag. They have an old lady like cussing, saying he's a mean motherfucker, and like we're supposed to laugh at that. We're supposed to think, ha 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 ha, when it's really just kind of stupid. So the movie is better. I mean, the book is better for sure. But the ending, again, it's something to think about. What does it mean? Have any of y'all read it? What do you think? Let me know in your comments below if you wish to. Thanks for watching.